Today we're going to be talking about the carbon cycle. First thing we're going to do in our paper is we're going to create both land and water. Starting right here, we're going to go up. And now we have this area off to the left-hand side, which is going to be our water, with our land off to the right-hand side. First thing we're going to add is the sun. The sun's energy is what's going to drive the carbon cycle. And that sun's energy is going to be transmitted to two places in the carbon cycle. The first place we're going to transmit it would be to a tree. We're going to put it right here in this middle box. And also algae that are going to go into the water. We draw the arrows showing that the sun's energy is going to the algae and also going to the tree, and label it energy. We're going to continue with the algae in the aquatic part of the carbon cycle. This algae is going to be consumed by a fish. There we go. That fish, just like every other living thing, along with the algae, will eventually die. And when those things die in the aquatic environment, they will eventually be consumed by the decomposers. And whatever material, carbon specifically, is left over will be dropped down onto the floor. And over thousands of years, under the right conditions, that carbon will eventually be turned into fossil fuels. Now, since the major atmospheric component of the carbon cycle is CO2, we're going to talk about where CO2 is going in the cycle. The first thing we're going to say is that the CO2 is going to be going into the algae because they are photosynthetic, so they will consume the carbon dioxide. Fish, on the other hand, will be performing cellular respiration, so they will be adding to the atmospheric CO2. With the tree, again, just like the algae, they'll be doing photosynthesis, taking in CO2. Another way CO2 is transmitted into the aquatic environment is through diffusion. And if you remember from other science classes, diffusion is defined as the movement of a molecule from a high concentration to a low concentration. So this is moving from the higher concentration in the atmosphere into the water. So we have our CO2. It's going to react with H2O to produce H2CO3, which is bicarbonate. That bicarbonate will combine with calcium that is present in the ocean and produce calcium carbonate, which is a major component of shells. Once those shells are shed by the organisms that use them, they'll go down to the ocean floor, experience burial and compaction, and they will eventually turn into limestone. Moving back to the land-based, we're going to add in some fruit to our tree. Make it an apple tree, put some fruit on there, because we know that when photosynthetic organisms take in the CO2, the product they produce that contains carbon through photosynthesis is glucose, which chemical formula is C6H12O6, and that glucose is a major component of the fruit that the plant produces. We're going to add in a gentleman right here, and he is going to be taking part in consuming one of those apples. So we're going to go from here to here. We're going to look at consumption. Eventually, like the fish and the algae, this gentleman will also die. And we're going to take into account this forest or tree, however we want to look at it, and other living things. And when they undergo death, they also will be broken down by the decomposers, experience burial and compaction, and under the right conditions of heat and pressure, produce fossil fuels. Now we're going to add one more component to our land when it comes to what is taking in CO2, and that's going to be kind of like a grassland right here. Now the reason being is because the grassland will also do photosynthesis and take out CO2. But another thing to take into account is that grasslands, since they are perennial plants, they will have a very large root structure. They need this large root structure in order to maintain enough carbon for future growth years. So during their growing season, during the warmer months, they will grow above ground foliage, leaves, and then during the winter months when they go dormant, they'll store the carbon in their roots, and that's kind of a major source of energy for them to regrow the next time the weather warms up and they're able to enter into their growing season. We're going to add an arrow coming from the human to the CO2 because as a living thing, all living things do respiration because all living things require energy that respiration provides in the form of ATP. Now you notice there isn't an arrow coming out of the tree because the net production of CO2, there is no net production of CO2 when it comes to plants because they consume more CO2 than they put out, even though they still do respiration to get that energy. We're going to add in kind of a power plant right here with a smokestack coming out, and also have a car here as well with the tailpipe and the smoke coming out of that as well. The reason why we have these two is because they are a major component of anthropogenic carbon emissions. And anthropogenic means man-made, and that is through the combustion of fossil fuels. So we're going to take these fossil fuels and we will extract them from the ground, use them in our cars and in power plants to provide electricity, and they will be combusted in the presence of oxygen and release CO2. When the last thing we're going to add is this limestone that was made through the burial of the seashells, will eventually be brought up and used for cement and buildings and other things that we use as humans. After looking at all this, you will see a lot of arrows that are coming in and out of CO2, and you might think because of all the arrows that CO2 makes up a majority of our atmosphere. The reality is that CO2 only makes up roughly 0.036% of our atmosphere. That number is rising because of the combustion of fossil fuels that we are using as humans. So that percentage is rising closer to 0.038%, and that is only a 2,000th of a difference, but even a small difference like that is going to have dramatic effects on our environment because of CO2 being a greenhouse gas. And greenhouse gases have that ability to warm our atmosphere because of their ability to trap heat. We're going to finally label Each portion of the drawing is either natural and sustainable or as human alterations. Going from all the way to the left to the point right here, we will label as natural and sustainable. From fossil fuels onto the right, I'm sorry, we're going to go a little bit farther. We're actually going to go from the grassland to the right. The reason being is we are taking fossil fuels out of the ground and using them for combustion, but we're also experiencing deforestation and removal of grasslands for other uses of humans. So we are altering what could be a natural and sustainable resource like a forest or a grassland by our use of those different areas. And that is your carbon cycle.